Hey, Boy Manning here. Welcome to a Friday night edition of the Garden Report. And we welcome back to the show Nuggets writer Matt Brooks off a exciting game between the Celtics and Nuggets. Another one. Nuggets take both games in the season series from Boston. Potential finals preview, of course. And the Nuggets still look every bit the defending champion. And they've, in my mind, Matt, from the beginning of this year, been the favorites. I think they keep showing that when it matters. And a game like this, they played like they were trying to show they were, that team. And the way they schemed this one, the way they executed down the stretch, and maintained the lead against the Celtics for most of this game, which not many teams have done.
Yeah.
And even coming into this game as a 1-point favorite, at least the last line I saw coming in, that's only happened 3 times this year. So a lot of credit to the Nuggets. They've been incredible. I'll start there with them. What's this season been like so far? What have you thought of them coming off the championship?
Yeah. To describe the Nuggets season, they came out ablaze, on fire. I don't know what they started, but it was good, and they were leading the West. And then Jamal Murray gets hurt, and they do fine. They play like 500ish ball without him. Heading into the All-Star break, they're playing fine, and then coming out of the All-Star break, it's been kind of what we saw yesterday, where the team's really locked in. They're really focused. They're very detail oriented right now. And yeah, it's just, you get this sense that Denver's figured out how to play the regular season game, right? Like they know when to peak, when to play your best basketball, which to me is in the last couple of months of the season. The other thing is they've been healthy for the most part, which is also a pretty big luxury. And maybe that part of that is just that they are trying to like ramp up, is probably what I call it, right on the eve of the playoffs.
Yeah, and Joe Mazzulla coming out of that first game, and the first game was great too between these two.
Excellent.
Uh, both teams threw blows. Celtics, really Nuggets too, but both missing shots down the stretch. And I think Jokic got off one late, and Tatum missed the one at the buzzer. So that one coming out of it, and Joe Mazzulla is usually like this, but especially after that game, he was feeling good about the shots they got. Liked how they limited Jokic at times. They played him more straight up in that game,
Yeah.
and they thought, if they got a better shot off on that last possession, you're at least forcing overtime there with them, and who knows what happens. A little bit of a step back in this one. I know they storm back late. They get the shot wide open in the corner to take the lead with under a minute left, similar to the first game. But Nuggets through the middle portion of this game really controlled things. Took the lead going into the second. I thought 32-26 dominated the second, at least with their defense, forcing turnovers. All the rest, the 12 turnovers for Boston doesn't look horrible on paper, but when they had 9 flowing between like the start of the second and the middle portion of the third, it was like a flood. And Celtics really haven't done that this year. And the Nuggets made them look really bad there with the way they were scheming up the defense. That's where I start with this one.
Mm-hmm.
They were so prepared for what Boston wanted to do offensively, and
Yep.
I haven't seen any team be able to do that this year.
Yeah, I thought a couple things. I mean, first off, both teams shot like 29%, a combined 29% from three, and it was still a good game, which is always impressive to me. Denver was really ready for the Tatum Porzingis pick and pop. They kind of allowed it a little bit more the first time these two teams played. Porzingis got going in that first quarter. I think he had something like 12 points in the game in
Yeah, he had like
January.
3 threes in the first quarter.
Yeah. So Denver was like a little more prepared for that, and they started just sending extra help from the guy who was like one pass away, I guess. So a lot of times that was KCP. KCP got 2 steals just by flying over to Porzingis off his man when Porzingis pick and popped, and that ended up being like a really good process from the Nuggets. And they're pretty used to playing like that. Like that is the thing I think about this matchup, is that not only Denver was ready for certain actions like that, but the way they played, I think, or the way they typically play, the Nuggets, I mean, just on terms of pick and rolls, they'll hedge or they'll play their guys up or they're even blitz. And I think that specific style of pick and roll defense was really effective yesterday.
I like the way they utilize Jokic there too, because he'll play up against that pick and roll. There was some great aggressive rotations behind him too.
Yeah.
If Porzingis was going to roll, they were cutting off those passes. If guys were trying to post smalls, they did a good job staying in front of them, and they just coaxed the Celtics into some really bad passes. Live ball turnovers, a lot of them turned into points the other way. It impressed me big time, and I think the other thing that impressed me is this Celtics team coming in, off the 11 straight wins. I know the Nuggets had a win streak before that Phoenix game coming in too. So the Celtics were executing at like the highest level coming into that Cavs game, and they collapsed late in that game. But for 3/4 of that Cavs game right before this, they were continuing that trend of just punishing mismatches. If you have anyone on the floor that you can go at, they're just going to devastate that guy, drive him off the floor. And they did a little bit of that in the first Nuggets game where Christian Brown couldn't stay on the floor for more than like one rotation in that game, I remember. And it wasn't the same deal in this one. He survived a little bit longer. The numbers against him still weren't great. I think they went 5 of 7 against him. He had 4 fouls, but it felt like he was just able to survive out there a little longer. Same with a guy like Reggie Jackson. Same with a guy like, Zeke Naji held the Celtics to 1 of 7 in this one. Even Jokic, who this game more than any other showed me, and I know people say it all the time who watch the Nuggets more regularly, that he's a much better defender than he gets credit for. The way he's able to like dig at the ball handler, recover to the paint, he's just moving out there, and he's in great positions. And I think the final number, I think I have it here in front of me. Celtics got off like 28 shots against them, made 14. So you'll take that, I think, if the Celtics are trying to put him in actions as much as they were trying to there. And, down the line here, like Jamal Murray, Celtics shot 3 of 11 against him.
He was great. He was great because the Celtics tried to post him up a couple of times, and he really held his own.
6 of 14 Porter. Like the way they just prevented the Celtics from taking advantage of some of their, quote, weaker defenders, to me was super impressive because the Celtics have just devastated mismatches all year long.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I think part of it is just that Denver, when you talk about like Jamal and Michael Porter Jr. and Jokic, Aaron Gordon's been there for a couple of years. These guys have like been playing this scheme now for 3 to 6 years, I would say, for most of these guys. KCP is a newcomer, but like KCP is a great defender. He's going to pick up stuff right away. But for the most part, like that's the advantage of having a core that's been there for a while and a scheme that you've been running for a while is that everybody's really comfortable within it. They know that each other's tendencies. They know, how much help and when you need to help when Nicola's playing up. And Nicola is just so much more comfortable now. Even from like when I started covering the Nuggets, which was like last March, he is just, I don't know. He just looks really comfortable playing up and using his hands and just kind of being a deflections magnet in a way. And I think in large part, yesterday was a really good example of like, you have to be on your A game against Denver because if you're being sloppy with the ball, their defense is aggressive. Like it's meant to force turnovers. So that I thought that was pretty interesting yesterday.
Yeah, and they are up to, let's see exactly where they are defensively, 9th. And that was their
Big jump.
weakness before
Big
they
jump.
won the championship. Yeah, and they tightened it up last year. Now it looks like a strength of theirs, especially to be able to do this against arguably the best offense in the league and statistically too in Boston. I guess the question everybody has on top of that, especially the viewers here, is what happened with Tatum here, because this was one of his more passive games. It had shades of that final series, 2022. Him not being super involved on the ball, being turned into a passer for a lot of this game, and being made to look bad in that passing role. 8 assists, 5 turnovers, a mediocre ratio, I'd say. Just too many timely turnovers too that turned into points the other way. And then by the end of the game, just looking uninvolved. I know he didn't like some of the calls early. He was complaining at times out there. So this one to him, especially coming off the final miss in the Cleveland game where he received some criticism. A lot of MVP talk before that. This little stretch right here is probably going to derail that. It was a weird game from him, and he's been great all year. He had this stretch of like 8-9 games with 5+ assists. So he'd been playing well prior to this week, but something the Nuggets did here kept him just very passive here and away from the play.
Yeah, I think they got the ball out of his hands pretty early. That was the goal, to not let him get in a rhythm, even if that came at the expense of Jalen getting going, who was just outstanding. That was like one of the best performances I've seen him have. Like, obviously, I'm not watching the Celtics day in day out, but for me,
This could
like,
have been
that
a
was
blowout if it wasn't for him.
he was great. I mean, he was just great and so athletic. And that was one of my takeaways from Boston's side was Denver really couldn't stay in front of him. He got going in transition. And he was just getting by guys. So I thought that was really something that stood out to me. But yeah, I think Denver did a good job of like not letting Tatum get into a rhythm early, getting the ball out of his hands. If that means, hey, we're going to send two guys to Tatum and potentially leave Porzingis open on those, pick and pop plays, so be it. We trust our rotations behind that. So I think that was a big focal point for them, and I thought they did really well with that.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the Porzingis stuff too in terms of how they were guarding his pops. I think Jokic just being in the lane as much as he is discouraged some of the post ups because he's been a
Yeah.
devastating post up guy this year, and he's someone
Hmm.
you would think they'd go after some of the smaller guards and stuff like that with to put them in foul trouble or just get easy baskets over them. And I think he took 23 shots in this game, 10 of them threes, and they did start getting out on him later in the game, especially after he hit those two out of halftime. But overall, like you said, it didn't feel like they were too worried about him shooting the long threes, especially. They were willing to drop on that with Jokic, and it's a fine line because he can get going out there and have those
Yeah.
kind of games. If he hits a couple more of those, this is probably a different type of game. But I felt like even he got thrown off his game, and he's been incredibly consistent this year. I really can't remember too many bad games from him at all. And this wasn't necessarily a bad one, but they limited how impactful he could be in a
Hmm.
matchup where he, went crazy a little bit early in that first meeting between these two.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the other thing, like, I felt like a lot of, but I mean, how many threes did Boston take?
They didn't take as many as they usually do. I want to say it was in the 30s. I got the number here exactly, 38. So they're usually closer to 50.
Yeah, I thought that was. I mean, Malone brought that up after the game, saying we did not want to get these guys going from 3-point land. And that's kind of the give or take of Jalen getting going. Is that, yeah, it carried Boston, but at the same time, there wasn't nobody else really had a rhythm by the very end of the game. If that kind of makes sense.
They weren't connected. And
Yeah,
the Nuggets, they had some stretches in this game where things got a little dicey, like the fourth quarter comeback stretch there. Some of the shot selection there didn't seem to be the best, especially while managing a lead. But they were able to stop a lot of timeouts from Malone in this one, reset, run a good play. The Celtics, for some reason, especially in the middle portion of this game, just look sped up, look frantic at times. And even as you said, as good as Jalen was, a lot of it's like really pushing in transition, being ultra
yeah,
aggressive. He only had 2 turnovers. It felt like he had a few more than that just watching, but their offense seemed to grow more frantic as the game went on. And they did have some stretches like Holiday went after Jokic late. You had some stretches where Tatum was able to get the ball close to the basket, but for most of the game, they looked frenetic out there. And that's when, I'm sure you've seen like all the Celtics panicking and stuff. And I'm not really in panic mode after a game like this, but you wonder when things get dicey in a game like this. And
yeah.
I know they haven't been down a lot this year and they haven't been in a ton of crunch time situations to bring it back to Tuesday. I don't get why it looks so frantic because you have the best offense in the league. You can slow it down, find a matchup, make the right pass if some extra pressure's coming at you, like Tatum, like it was at Tatum in this one. They just looked like, at least between these two teams, the team that had been in fewer of these kind of situations, fewer of these kind of games. Whereas, as you said, the Nuggets have just played together for so long that it's kind of seamless, especially the Gordon backline stuff that slammed the door shut in this game.
Yeah, I think there's one play, the 3-on-1 or 3-on-2 that Boston had where like Tatum and Brown like ping ponged it to each other and then it ends up with a corner three. Like, that was the play where I was like, that was just a weird way to like, it was just a weird play at the end of the game. Like, it was not crisp, I think is probably the word I'm looking for. And then you go down the other side, Denver runs Murray, Jokic pick and roll, and they get the switch with Tatum now guarding Jokic, and then that draws. But Jokic kind of like holds on to his dribble for a couple, draws help eventually, and just dumps it right off to Aaron Gordon for the dunk. And it's like I don't know if those plays were right after each other, but they were definitely like right near each other. And I remember just thinking like, this is like just a difference in execution right now between these two teams. And that's who Denver's been. And to credit to Boston, by the way, because they were down like 12 with like 10 minutes remaining, and they got it down to 2 because of those 2 threes from Holiday. But watching it, I never felt like Denver was going to choke it away. I don't know how to explain it. I just didn't think it was going to happen.
No, especially the way Jokic was playing, and I don't think there's just a different standard for him because you come out of it at 32, 12, and 11, and if anyone else had that, you're like, wow, that's like the game of their life. But I don't feel like he killed them in this one.
Yeah.
I think you live with 115 points from the Nuggets and the game he had and the game everybody else had here. The Celtics definitely had some lapses defensively, especially that last lob to Gordon. You really need another rotation over to him, especially after how many times he threw that down. But I like them putting a little bit more pressure on Jokic early, trying to get the ball out of his hands because they played him more straight up last time, and he just annihilated them in that game as a scorer.
Porzingis.
This one, you saw different looks, mostly Porzingis again. I thought you might see more Holiday than you did, but I just don't think they want to go small on him, especially in the post. What do you think of the job they did on him? You can only do so much.
You know who I liked? I thought Tillman was pretty good. I thought Tillman was pretty good, and he's been good on Jokic in the past. I thought he was like good in the first half. I don't know like how much you can play him, but like
that
I
was
thought
the
he did
tough
a
part.
pretty good job. Yeah,
He did a good
I thought he was
job,
good.
but then the offense kind of got bogged down on the other end with the double bigs out there. So that's the trade-off. And then late, you go small with Pritchard, and that was really the stretch that was like, because they go right after him twice.
I don't know what like he was when Pritchard was there in the Jokic minutes. I was surprised by that. That to me just seems like a losing plan, and it was a stretch that like got Boston in trouble. I did not know why he was out there at that time.
Yeah, they were experimenting this one, and I'll give them that. You gotta, in a game like this, last meeting against a potential finals opponent here.
Yeah.
But you do see, like, when a opposing coach is really scheming it up like Malone was there and, making adjustments on the fly. And I thought that the Nuggets utilized their bench well in this game, too. Watson was awesome. You had some other guys coming off there, too, that made contributions. Najee. I thought he just coached a much better game than Missoula did. And there's the thing with Joe. I think especially at this stage of the season, he's going to try to let these guys figure it out. But they just were too frantic at times. They probably need a little bit more, intervention from the sideline and some, just ways to get Tatum back involved again. Maybe ways to reposition where Kristaps was on the floor. The biggest thing to me, though, is that Derek White, who has just been incredible this year, really uninvolved too. He had a couple pick and rolls from him. He was mostly in catch and shoot positions. You could say the same about Holiday too, because the handful of times he got the ball at the end of the game, you mentioned a couple of threes, but even that skip pass he threw to Hauser, with 3 guys in front of him there and really tough angle. Like, those are your point guards. And if Tatum's turned the ball over, if Brown, as aggressive as he was, is playing more frantically, those are the guys you should lean on to, get you into your sets and stuff. And the Nuggets do that. That's one of my favorite things about Jokic. And Tatum has done it at times in his career, but he doesn't do it nearly as often as Jokic. Set a screen, get into the, pocket there and make some passes out of that position rather than playing 30 feet from the basket and just kind of eating those double teams that the Nuggets are throwing at you.
Yeah, I agree. It's weird. I forgot. I don't remember anything that Derek White did in that game at all. And again, I think that's a little bit of the give or take of like if you have one guy going like that, like Jalen was, it's both keeps you afloat, but it also really kind of disconnects you in a way where you're just like kind of just letting him eat and letting him cook, but that's not
exactly how I felt. Yeah.
And it just kind of like you felt it at the end. There's just kind of no rhythm versus Denver's like they're not trying to hit homers. They're like trying to hit doubles kind of the whole game or singles.
Did Jokic even take a three? I don't think he did.
I
Took,
don't
none.
know. Yeah, none. I mean, like in Jamal it was
Going in the
good.
mid-range.
Jamal was okay. Like he was good in the minutes where Jokic wasn't there, which is kind of when they needed him to be really good. But he was like fine. It wasn't he's definitely had better games since the All-Star break. And that Denver got what they needed to. Their bench was huge. I mean, what they got from Watson was great. I thought Christian Brown was pretty good. And just overall, like whenever they get like 20 plus points out of their bench, 25 plus, that's a pretty good thing for Denver.
I think it's telling too, and you said it earlier in the show, when the three is as absent from the game as it was in this one, just 15 makes between the two sides, bunch of plays around the basket, mid-range a factor here. It does make for a more interesting watch, especially with some of the 2-point styles you see between Jokic and Brown in this one going downhill a ton. It made for a more interesting kind of brand of basketball rather than some of these 3-point contests that go back and forth across the league a lot of times here. So I think most people are dreaming of a final series between these two teams and what that might look like. We'll get into that a little bit here. I just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor here, new sponsor in Prize Picks. They're giving you a $100 deposit match, up to $100 right now. So go over there and download the app, check it out. It's the most fun you can have, winning up to 25 times your money. Right now, you go in, pick a couple stat lines, see what guys are projected to do in these games. I know I had a lot of fun picking before that Warriors game, seeing what guys were going to do on Sunday. Tatum's been a easy pick in a lot of these games, so not this most recent one. And Curry, I thought was a slam dunk in that Sunday one, but that's the fun of it. Go in there, pick a couple guys. You can set your lineup 2 to 6 selections. And again, really easy bonus to just plug in right here and try out right now. Use the code CLNS at prizepicks.com/CLNS. That's CLNS for a 100% match up to $100 right now when you head over to Prize Picks. Great time to do it. A lot of basketball going on. March Madness about to start as well. So go check out what they're doing over there. Again, that's the code CLNS. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy over at Prize Picks. So go check that out. Is this feeling like, I think we had a similar conversation last year, Matt, because it felt like it was going that way last year too. But especially this year, it feels like this could be the finals. And in a weird way, among all the doubts I have about this happening, I actually worry a little bit more about the Nuggets just because of how grueling the West is. Like it's a Phoenix, Denver first round right now. And, the Celtics are talking about maybe Chicago, Atlanta, maybe like a Philly or Indiana dips down to that 8 seed. But there's just a difference in path. The packed, 3-team race atop the West right now. Some of the lower teams, including like the Warriors, Lakers kind of teams, Sacramento, Dallas even. It's just a loaded conference. So I feel good about this being the finals here. But between some of the Celtics' past letdowns and that loaded West, those are probably the two things you're looking at and saying, all right, if it's not going to happen, it'll be one of those two factors.
So if the Nuggets are healthy, I feel pretty good about it. That's kind of been
even with the Clippers kind of floating.
Yeah, I haven't, in fairness to the Clippers, we haven't really seen them play the Nuggets with the new look team. They played I think they played Denver the first week after the play-in tournament. So when Harden first got there, so you can kind of throw that game out. And then the 3 before that, they played Denver and LA played each other 4 times before December. So you can kind of throw all those out. I don't have a great feel for how those teams play each other. They're probably the team I look at the most and say, yeah, that's probably going to be the most difficult one, depending on what happens with Towns. But I'm sort of expecting him to be, I don't know if he's going to be able to play or if he's going to be nearly as effective as he's been this year. So I think the Clippers are one of the teams I'm looking at. The Suns intrigue me in a weird way. I get it. They haven't had the year they'd want. And their guys are never healthy or never on the floor together. which sounds a lot like the Nets, the team that I used to cover. But I still like I get it. The talent's there. Booker did, he had a great series against Denver last year in the playoffs. So those are probably the two teams. But generally, just coming out of this All-Star break, seeing what I've seen from Denver, how locked in they've been, how much they've played above and beyond what I expected them to do in these final 26-ish games, I feel pretty good about them coming up.
Yeah, that's an interesting one in Phoenix because they are getting healthy. They're starting to play more games together. Some role guys have stepped up for them too, and they beat the Nuggets in that last game there.
They
I
did.
wonder what stood out to them in that one against them because it's a weird game probably the Nuggets should have won, but the Celtics do have them coming up tomorrow, so I'm interested to hear what you thought of them.
Yeah, I thought they were good. I think with Phoenix, like I've been trying to think about the best way to beat Denver, and I'm not like talking about scheme stuff. I just mean in like a macro sense, like how would you do it? I think the way you do it is you get a really big lead on them, which means you need a big offense. Because if you're in a crunch time game, I mean, we saw it yesterday, like Jokic and Murray, but Jokic is so surgical in those moments. He's never sped up, he's never flustered. He's going to make the right play. It's going to be a lob to Aaron Gordon, or he's going to set the perfect screen for Jamal Murray, and that's going to give Murray some space to pull up from the mid-range. Like, he's so good in those moments that I almost feel like the way to beat Denver is you have to build like a big lead, big lead. And even if Denver chips away at it, they tire themselves out, right? They wear themselves out. And that's kind of what happened against Phoenix. Like Grayson Allen gets going in the first half. I think he hits, I don't even know how many threes, 5, 6 threes, maybe more than that in the first half. And Phoenix enters halftime with a 15-point lead. And then the second half, the Nuggets slowly chip away at it and eventually get the game to go to overtime. But goes to overtime, they're gassed. Like, they have nothing because they've spent all that energy trying to come back. So I think that is how you would beat Denver. I just don't think going into like a close game throughout all 48 minutes is tenable almost, because they're just so good in those situations. And if that is how every single game is in a series, they're winning 4 of 7. Like, I don't know. So that's what I've been trying to think about is like, all right, yeah, you want a team that can defend Denver, and Phoenix, to their credit, like Nurkic is a big guy. He can get in the way of Jokic. But they also have an offense, I think, on paper is explosive enough to keep up with Denver.
Yeah, and Nurkic has that familiarity with Jokic too, which I thought was the only part about that addition I like, because I didn't like that one overall for Phoenix, but he's played decently this year, been
And the
relatively
Clippers are the
healthy.
same. The Clippers are the same because I think Zubac has done fine against Jokic in the past. So that's another one. Like, you get it that they have the
They're such a good
firepower.
switching defense too. They really can switch almost every position.
Yeah.
And
So those two.
yeah, and that's bothered Boston too. So they're another. That's the thing with me with right now with Boston is I feel good about them coming out of the East. There's a Milwaukee thing brewing. Heat are always tough, but unlike last year where I had some real doubts about Boston despite the record due to a bunch of different reasons, this team I feel much better about because they've been much more consistent. They haven't had bad losses for the most part. The offense looks functional, like there's some real like bread and butter stuff that I think they can lean on. Tatum and Brown have both been much better this year. And I think the coaching has been better too. So again, I'm not coming out of this week panicking. In fact, in this matchup, as you mentioned there, the, kind of blowout, massive lead you need over a team. The one thing I think you look at here with this game, if you're trying to take a more positive look at it from Boston's perspective, that 3-point differential between the teams, the 38-21 in attempts, Joe really loves that. And I know the Nuggets are deadly from 2, but again, a couple more threes go in there from Boston's end, and you're talking about a much different game here. And that's always the case, but they're able to just get up so many more threes than the Nuggets generally, it feels like. And a lot of times, I know 7 games is a smaller sample size here, but that will lead to a couple games where the Celtics are just raining threes, and it's going to be tough for the Nuggets to keep up in that sense. And in this game, the Celtics missed 9 free throws on top of that. So they played within 6 with all of that going against them. I feel along with the turnovers. So they've played tight with the Nuggets without hitting shots in both of these games, and I think that is what would put them in a position of being like a slight favorite over Denver, along with the home court that they'll probably have in this series if it comes to it. The Nuggets just they limit the threes a team takes, which I think works well for them. They're so good from two, and that can project to fit a little better in the playoffs. And they have the best player on the court by a significant margin in Jokic here. So it's an intriguing matchup. Like this, just the back and forth, the scheme stuff,
Yeah.
even just the style of the game. It was really pretty to watch here. I don't know how you can root for, outside of maybe some extra star power with other matchups, or maybe like some other like storylines going into a
Yeah.
series. This, from a basketball standpoint, to me, would just be by far the most interesting finals.
Yeah, I agree. Like last year's finals was good tactically, but there was just such a difference in talent with Denver and Miami. This feels a little bit more like I think what you're looking for in terms of, yeah, there's going to be a lot of tactical adjustments. You're going to look at this kind of game to game. All right, what's this team doing in game two that's different from game one? But I think there's a little bit more of, it's just a little more equal talent wise. So I hope we get it. I really do. I don't know who else I'd want to see Denver play from like an entertainment perspective. I don't really want to watch them play Miami. I haven't enjoyed how those two teams Miami definitely not, but Milwaukee too. Like,
I think it would have been Philly if Philly was
yeah, for
healthy.
the obvious reasons, I think for sure. But outside of that, like I don't know. The Milwaukee matchup just doesn't intrigue me at all for Denver.
There's something about them still, and they're playing better. They play the Celtics in a week or two here, so I'm interested to see how that goes. But I still don't have a strong level of belief in them, especially from a defensive standpoint. But Giannis is Giannis, so you got to respect them
Yeah.
in that sense. But the East is definitely weaker this year. Injuries have played a big part too. I thought Philly was awesome before Embiid went down. They were well coached. They were doing some different stuff. So if they can get healthy, that'll be interesting here. What was the atmosphere like at this game? I know there were a lot of Celtics fans. I know it's a good crowd out there in Denver. Probably similar to the MSG game we saw a week or two ago here, where it's that real strong home court, but then there's that undercurrent of Celtics fans there too. It seemed like it was an interesting crowd.
Definitely an interesting crowd. God, it felt like a playoff game. It's been a while since I feel like I've been to one that's been kind of like that. I couldn't even tell you what the last one was. Maybe one of like Golden State games or something like, I don't know. Maybe one of the Lakers games. But regardless, there hasn't been that many that have really felt like a playoff game. And that was it. Like that got me excited. That got me like checking the calendar, being like, oh, hey, we only got a little bit more than a month to go. So I thought the crowd was great. There were a lot of Celtics fans though.
I'm ready too for the playoffs, and there's this string here right now, and I'm looking at the Nuggets schedule. What's coming up for them? Like they got the Heat, the finals rematch again in a week or two here on the
Yep.
road, and another Wembanyama game right after that. Minnesota, who a couple Minnesota games, they look like that threat. The Clippers game, as you mentioned, the third one of those. They actually have 3 Minnesota games down the stretch.
Yeah, crazy.
So there's some good games there for the Nuggets down the stretch. The Celtics, they got the Suns twice this week, as I mentioned, which will be fun. Late next week, I think there's just a massive drop off though, and there is that Bucks game down the stretch. But after Saturday, it's like Blazers, Jazz, Wizards, Pistons, Bulls, Hawks, and it's like, oh no. Like end of March, April is just gonna be like rest city, blowout after blowout. They got the Thunder to start April, but like there's a lot of Hornets, Blazers, Wizards down the stretch here for the Celtics, which is gonna be tough ahead of this highly anticipated playoff run here.
That's funny. Yeah, the Thunder game should be good. Thunder. I mean, anytime you're playing any of the teams that are, really any team in the West right now.
Them? Are you buying them as a real contender?
No, I don't want to be too dismissive, but
they're young. They're really young.
They're young, and they have questions for me. Like they just have guys that, like, you always think about guys that are just going to be sagged off of like Giddy's the obvious one, but like Lou Dort, like there's going to be a game where Lou Dort takes 7 threes in a playoff game, and that is so boomer bust and probably not going to work in their favor. And then they're just young. I mean, they've got a rookie big man out there who's going to be dealing with like playoff intensity, playoff physicality for the first time. I'm interested to see what Shea looks like. Really curious. That is another team that I think their matchups really matter. Like, let's say they play the Pelicans and Shea's first real playoff series is against like Herb Jones and, all the defenders that New Orleans can throw at him. So, yeah, I'm not totally buying them. But it's funny. Like, the West is so close right now. I find myself watching a lot of Thunder games, Wolves games, because it matters right now. Nuggets seeding changes like every single day. So it's tight. It's fun.
Yeah, no matter what, it's going to be 4, if they go that far, intense series for Denver here into the postseason. It's not quite the same in the East, but you think of maybe like a Luka Jokic matchup round 1. Pelicans, they don't get talked a lot about, but they've been relatively healthy and stable this year. So they were one of the better West teams last year when they were healthy. I'm just fascinated by how that West playoff series is going to, or playoff, run is going to go there. And I'm just going to be happy to watch it from afar because it's going to be some real devastating exits out there, some series that go down to like the end of game 7. And so I'm interested, like if the Nuggets tear through that group out there, it's going to be, I think, like a lot of people started to believe in them after the championship last year. I think more people have started to as they've repeated that success this year. But if they show that they can tear through that West and then beyond that win like a second straight championship here, now you're talking about some dynasty stuff with this group, which I really, when you look at this core they have, and I know they lost Bruce Brown, now they're starting to bring up some young guys successfully, at least Watson out of that group early on. There's some real potential for that to be that kind of team, especially when you have that player leading the charge.
Yeah, I mean, after yesterday, it's like it does not feel that far-fetched. I know it's just a regular season game. I get it, but like
that Jokic play at the end, that was like, what Curry would do.
Yeah. Like
back in
he is one of the most effective offensive players I've ever watched. You just feel like he's going to make the right decision every time. I've watched a lot of really good offensive players in my time of covering the NBA. If people don't know, I covered the Nets before Denver. So I watched Harden, KD, Kyrie. Like I've watched a
little bit of them.
yeah, that's true. When they were there. But even then, it's just like I've never seen anything like Jokic. He is, he's just constantly making the right decision, constantly thinking the game through, and it just seems like he's playing almost a different sport or playing at a different speed than everybody else. Like basketball is at 0.5 speed for Jokic, and it's normal speed for everybody. It's pretty wild to watch.
I was bummed. You mentioned the Nets. I watched Jack Vaughn's last game as head coach out there, the 50-point loss. I liked them. I'm sure you like covering them too.
Me too.
Insightful, big personality. I thought he did a good job to start out there. But man, are they in a bad place. And all the moves they made are looking bad now. You hear like maybe they could have got all those picks back for Bridges, and you're like, why didn't they do that? Now the season has really gone south. And Ben Simmons goes down for the year. And it feels like that could potentially be the beginning of the end of him, at least there, maybe in the league as a whole. So how have you kind of watched that whole thing break down from afar? It's kind of crazy how quickly and sharply it declined.
Well, I haven't been watching them. I think I watched them like at the very beginning. They played Dallas and Luka hit that crazy game winner. That was about it. It was the last Nets game I watched.
They went from competitive to bad really fast.
Yeah, it seems like it snowballed really quick. So it's a tough situation. Like I was always kind of a little lower on them because teams that are figuring it out, right? Like in between what they're trying to do. I never feel like those teams. I mean, there are some that will overachieve. Like you look at like the Thunder with Chris Paul and Young Shea and Dennis Schroeder. Like that team overachieved. But more often than not, it's like, this Nets situation or the Raptors from a couple of years ago after they go to the second round. I think they lost the Celtics. Am I right about that? Anyways, yep. that's kind of more often than not what happens. And I feel like the Nets kind of fall into that bucket of like, they're trying to figure it out. Honestly, if you're on that team, are you looking at your jersey being like, I'm gonna be a Net for the next 4 years? Like,
Well,
no,
that was
like,
weird because that's where it
like,
really seemed to fall apart. There was when the Knicks fans invaded the arena and like everyone was making fun of Bridges, and he was just kind of like, "Yeah, that happened."
yeah, it's been a tough year. And yeah,
And I'm
I don't know
bummed
what to
too. I
do.
used to love, we do our podcast. I love going down there for those games. It was always a big game, that first round
Yeah,
series,
yeah,
2022. That's gone now. And when I went down there, there was a back-to-back, Brooklyn and Boston, back-to-back right before the break. And the Celtics
mm-hmm.
it was always at least a challenging game. After
Yep.
KD and Kyrie left, they'd play tough. This time, the Celtics just walked all over them. And then the next game was that 50-point game. And that's when you knew, like, all right, that might be it for Vaughn. And it was. So I don't know what's going to happen there, but they're in a bad place without their picks, with Simmons basically done here. And Bridges is great. They got a couple other pieces, but not nearly enough. So it's not a team you want to be rooting for right now. And
Yeah.
you left right at the right time.
I did. Yeah. It's funny how quickly I think I left in March, and then they did fine, and then they just lost to Philly in 4, and then that's been about it. So I do. It's funny. I do feel like I left right when everything kind of fell apart.
Well, he is Matt Brooks. Where can the people check out your work these days?
Everything is on nuggets.com. It's probably like the best place to go. I post pretty much everything I do on Twitter at Matt Brooks NBA right below here. But yeah, I think number one, go to nuggets.com. Any articles, video stuff that we're doing, we all throw it on there. So that's definitely the place to go.
All right. Good catching up with you as always. Hopefully we'll talk again this summer. And hopefully I'll make it out to Denver. I still haven't been to Denver. I want to make it for this
Oh
game.
yeah.
Didn't work out, but hopefully we'll have a full series out there. I'm still haunted by canceling my flight out there during Game 7 against the Heat because it looked like it was happening. But I don't know. The Nuggets might have torn through the Celtics in that series anyway.
They were
But
pretty good last year.
hopefully we'll get it back this year. Thanks for being here, Matt. We'll catch you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.